Out of all the villains that have tried to best Batman, the Riddler is one of the most curious ones. Ever since his first appearance in Detective Comics 140, he's been somewhat different from the other Batman villains. Instead of relying on petty criminal schemes or ruthless aggression, his style is more about cunning and deceit, with the use of riddles and puzzles designed to confuse the world's greatest detective. As we saw in the main trailer for The Batman, this movie will probably be a throwback to a darker, grittier version of the Caped Crusader story, similar to Tim Burton's version. This time, however, things are going to be much darker, with the director and writers grabbing inspiration from films like Cloverfield, Hunger Games, and Future Shock. It looks like The Batman will be a mix of spectacular visuals, coupled with an edgier atmosphere and a gloomier than gloom plot. This time the dark side of the story will most likely be carried by the Riddler. But this new incarnation is far from the green spandex-wearing lunatic that Jim Carey played decades ago. In this movie, the Riddler will play his role in a cold and calculative way, trying to make the Bat suffer from each iteration of his cerebral schemes. Because of this, our topic for today's video will be this new rendition of the Riddler, and how this time he may parallel other criminals, both real and fictitious, who had similar ways of committing crimes. First, we have to discuss who the Riddler is. We know he is an iconic villain in the Batman's Rogues Gallery, but for those who are not sure about his origin, let's do a quick recap. Edward Nygma, aka the Riddler, also named Edward Nashton depending on where you look, is a criminal genius who has an obsession with performing all sorts of elaborate schemes using riddles, puzzles, and traps designed to severely confuse his victims. Why does he do this, you may ask? For his own amusement. As a kid, Edward loved puzzles, and after seeing how he managed to cheat his way to first place in a puzzle-solving contest at school, his criminal tendencies started to flourish. Later on, he grew confident in his puzzle-making abilities and worked as a carnival employee who would fool his customers and take their hard-earned money with nothing but tricks and mind games. As time passed, he became better and better at what he did, and since he was always looking for a bigger challenge, he targeted the Batman as his new biggest adversary. He became the criminal trickster we know today, adopting the persona of the Riddler. It's common knowledge that his crimes are not of the standard kind. He doesn't mug you or kill you with his bare hands. No, he plays with your mind with games that feature different levels and elements that will toy with you until you meet your demise in the most rambunctious way possible. Remember that the Riddler does this for thrills. This is the most common description of the Riddler, but in the upcoming Batman movie, the Riddler seems to have a more subtle and creepier way of doing things, which makes him much more mysterious than his past incarnations. In the Batman's main trailer, we noticed a couple of things that made us believe that in this movie, the Riddler will grow and evolve as a criminal mastermind. This time he will feel more realistic and maybe a bit scary. The Riddler's question mark made in the froth or foam in the coffee cup is just the first sign of his plan in motion. This is similar to what the happy-faced serial killer Keith Hunter Jesperson did while he was on the prowl. Jesperson left a painting of a happy face near the bodies of his victims. On some occasions, he would send taunting letters to the police where he detailed his latest kill and signed it with a happy face. Jesperson's happy face and the Riddler's question mark are what is known as their calling cards, which are a type of object or imagery that is left in the scene of the crime to taunt the authorities and establish an identity by claiming responsibility for the crime that was committed. Another scene in the Batman trailer is when we see the Bat visiting someone in prison. We don't see the person's face, but if this is the Riddler, then his plan may be much deeper than we think, though we have seen something like this before. In the classic thriller Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal Lecter is visited by then FBI agent in training Clarice Starling to get his insight to help catch another serial killer named Buffalo Bill. During their conversation, Lecter manages to get into Starling's mind by slowly flexing his cleverness, intelligence, and power of perception to her. He first does this by guessing intimate details about Starling based on her smell, and then by belittling her for ruining their conversation by asking him to fill out a questionnaire. He then agrees to read the questionnaire, but instead of filling it, he ends up dissecting Starling's personality, seeing right through her thought patterns, hopes, and desires. Starling shoots back with a clever remark, and the conversation ends when Lecter shows his true colors and his taste in food, so to speak. Now, Batman is not as level-headed as Agent Starling, so it would be a lot easier for the Riddler to get into his head and make him react the way he wants him to. If letting himself get caught is part of his game, then a routine similar to Silence of the Lambs would be a way for him to establish his superiority, even under the illusion of incarceration. In a different scene from the trailer, we have a high view of a floor that has some sort of diagram spray painted on it. This is one of the Riddler's puzzles, and it serves as a way to make the Bat think that there is something to solve, even if it isn't necessarily the case. This is somewhat similar to what the Zodiac killer did when he sent coded messages to the police. His messages used a cipher that is difficult to crack. Although some of his messages have been partially deciphered, to this day, his case is still one of the biggest unsolved mysteries in the United States. This is something that the Riddler can easily imitate, especially if he has privileged knowledge about Batman and those close to him. We also see how a serial killer, who may or may not be the Riddler, does a live stream taunting Batman by saying that he is black, blue, and dead all over.
What's black and blue and dead all over?
If some of our history's most infamous criminals were still alive and free, this is something they would possibly do to belittle their victims and establish superiority by hitting them where it hurts the most, physically or psychologically. This was cruelly done by the notorious criminal Albert Fish, who sent a letter to the parents of one of his victims detailing everything that led him to decide to kill and devour his victim. He also described how he did it in the letter. What we are trying to say with all these comparisons is that this version of the Riddler will be much more cruel and cold. We all know that he isn't right in the head, and that has been established since his first appearance. But in the Batman, it seems like he's going one step beyond and use all of his knowledge and power to make a grand riddle that has the potential to break the Bat, or at the very least, leave him in a state where he feels defeated, even if he won. Instead of a glamorous show with clever but very noticeable traps, we may see a darker Riddler, a psychopath with a similar demeanor to Heath Ledger's Joker. Only instead of trying to use the Bat to break society, he will use society to break the Bat. Remember that for the Riddler, Batman is just another challenge to overcome, just for the thrills of success. This new Riddler may pretty much win if his plan and puzzles dig deep enough into Batman's psyche, so this could subvert every expectation we have for the movie. One last interesting detail is that even though the Riddler is the main villain of this movie, other villains are running around Gotham, so it will be fascinating to see if any of them fit into the puzzler's plans. So what do you think? Is the Riddler going to be a much darker villain in the Batman? Please don't forget to like and subscribe as we continue to make daily content here on Hypnos Mirror.